Well, thank you for coming today. I know it's a sacrifice for everybody that is here, but it is worth it. What we're doing is worthwhile. What we're doing is changing the lives of people today and people in the future. So give yourself a pat on the back for being here. I'm going to do a kind of a flyover Human Trafficking 101 this morning. And I think the majority of us can probably recite these definitions and some of the statistics, but I'm going to do a flyover because, like Marion said, we've always got to remember the basics. So human trafficking, we'll start with the definition. There's sex trafficking and labor trafficking, and I think there's a lot of emphasis on labor trafficking or on sex trafficking. But labor trafficking is there, and it's more prevalent than we know, and I never want to not mention it. So sex trafficking is a commercial sex act induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the victim is under 18 years of age. And so we know that anyone participating in a commercial sex act who is under 18 years of age is a form of severe human trafficking. Labor trafficking, again, we've got that force, fraud, or coercion. Coercion to recruit, harbor, transport, obtain, or employ a person for labor or services in involuntary servitude, peonage, debt, bondage, or slavery. There you have it, the definition. And the physical movement of the victim is not a requisite on this. It's the act of trafficking. The way I like to say it is that we move from exploitation, from vulnerability to exploitation. So we go from somebody who is vulnerable to somebody who has been exploited. Trafficking is straight up slavery. Restricted movement. They have little to no control over their work or their long hours. They're in debt bondage. The difference in slavery in 1850 and slavery today is this. In 1850, God forbid, if I owned a slave, that precious person's life would have cost me the equivalent of $40,000. Today, with $40,000, I can go down and I can buy a C-Class Mercedes. If I buy a C-Class Mercedes, I am going to change the oil, I'm going to keep it clean, I'm going to take good care of that thing that cost me so much money. Unfortunately, the price of a slave today, they estimate to be around $100. And I was talking with an ex-pimp one day, and I was saying this to him, and before I could even say $100, he interrupted me and said nothing, because he knew what it had cost him to traffic the hundreds of girls that he had trafficked in the 12 years that he was a trafficker. And he has done time for it. He's out now and actually living a really good life, helping ex-cons get out of the life. So it's a good thing. And I think that I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but I think that we need to remember that every person involved in this is a person. And we've got to treat them as people that have worth. On the other side of that coin, we can never lose sight of who is the perpetrator and who is the victim. And so there's that balance, there's that tension that we must always keep. Statistics, I'm not crazy about statistics, and probably some of you aren't either, because I don't think the statistics we have are good, but you always have to throw them in, right? So second largest and fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and that should tell us something there. That in itself should make us get up off our feet and be motivated. 27 million slaves worldwide now, more slaves than any time in history. 70% of female victims are trafficked for sex, and there's that labor trafficking, sex trafficking crossover that happens a lot. It's estimated that over 250,000 U.S. citizens are trafficked each year. Victims are invisible in plain sight. Somebody tell me what that picture is. Costco. Right, the first time. Our first trafficking victim in Central Oregon was a labor trafficking victim. And after she was free, I would pick her up from the shelter and try to help her normalize her life. And so I would take her on my errands with me, and I would take her to Costco with me. And when we first would start to go into Costco, she would freak out because her traffickers had taken her there. And she said she was always terrified that she wanted to ask for help, but her language wasn't good. She was Filipino, and she was afraid she couldn't speak right, and she was also afraid of what would happen to her when she got back home. And so victims are hidden in plain sight, and they are all around us. Many victims have no idea where they are, and that is labor and sex trafficking victims. Most don't realize, and they are traumatically bonded, like he said, to their captor. Labor trafficking, I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but I just have to mention that there is a lot of labor trafficking going on, and some of the ways that people are trafficked is domestic labor, agriculture, landscaping, day labor sites, garment factories, meat packaging plants, door-to-door sales, restaurants, bars, nail salons, consumer goods that are either brought in or are made by trafficking in the United States. And I talk about that quite a bit in chapters 3 and 4. Those chapters in my book, In Our Backyard, are about labor trafficking. So let's talk about sex trafficking. This sticker, by the way, this is a sticker that we use in Central Oregon, and it comes from my days in years gone by where I did a lot of anti-domestic violence work. And we put these inside of the stalls of restrooms, because sometimes that's the only time a victim is not with their trafficker. And so they go right inside. And when we did it with domestic violence, we used to have what we called a shoe card. And the shoe card they could just stick in their shoe and take with them. And if they were a victim of domestic violence, when they got home and their husband wasn't around, they could pull out that shoe card and ask for help. Well, that doesn't work with victims of human trafficking, because the pimp regularly shakes them down and strip searches them and checks everywhere for anything that they might see that might indicate that they are going to try to escape this entrapment. So we put these inside the bathroom stalls, and they've been quite effective. And in fact, I had no intention of putting them on hotel mirrors, but one of the survivors that was referred to me from the local police department said that when her pimp took her into one of the local hotels, that this was on the mirror when he took her in. And she said he took it off, but it works. And if anyone would like to have the artwork for that and use that in your town, I'd be delighted to give it to you. So who is trafficked? Who's targeted? Pretty much kids with needs. Anybody here that has a child that has no needs? So basically anyone can be a target of human trafficking. They look for low self-esteem. Any children with high self-esteem here don't have any problems with low self-esteem? Yeah. Dysfunctional home life, runaways, sexually active, normal kids. They're looking for normal kids. There are things that will make them more vulnerable. Child victim recruitment happens everywhere. High schools, middle schools, basically anywhere children congregate, a trafficker, that will be a good place for them. And the motivation is in the lower right corner, money. That is the motivator for human trafficking. If you lay domestic violence and human trafficking side by side, the psychological profiles are going to be almost exactly the same, except for domestic violence, it's a power and control over someone that they believe they love, and they have to use their power and control over them or they will lose them. But in trafficking, the motivator is sheer money, and that's what makes it so brutal. Children are at risk. Nationally, 450,000 children run away from home each year, and 1 out of 3 of those children will be lured towards human trafficking within 48 hours of the time they run away. So that equates to 150,000, and the average age for girls is 12 to 14, for boys 11 to 13. But it does happen to people other than runaways. This is a story out of the first chapter of my book, a girl we call Sarah. And Sarah was from Portland, Oregon, and she was raised in a really nice Christian home, upper middle class. Her parents' marriage was intact. They loved her dearly. She loved them. On her 16th birthday, her parents gave her a car, a used car, and said, okay, you're going to have to earn the insurance and the gas, and so you need to get a little after-school job. Well, Sarah met somebody at school, and it was another girl, and when she saw that girl had on a top that her mother said, you can't keep that top. She had bought the same top, and she said, you've got to take that back to the store. And so when Sarah saw the other girl wearing the top, she said, oh my gosh, I love your top. I wanted that, but I had to take it back. And she said, well, why? She said, well, my mom thought it was too revealing. And so that girl began from that moment to groom Sarah. I'm going to take a little parenthetical pause here and tell you that within a pimp's what we call stable, which is the group of girls that he traffics, within that group there is a competition for each of them to be the favorite. And that favorite person is given a title. And that title is bottom bitch. And that is the title that they want to achieve. And this girl was a bottom. She was at school, and a bottom has the authority to recruit, to punish, to collect the money, to make the dates, and she also has to have dates herself. And so she met this bottom, and within 3 months of meeting the bottom, Sarah was trafficked, she went missing, and she was gone for a year. And at the end of the year, there was a raid in a brothel in Las Vegas. And when the brothel was raided, Sarah wanted out. And so law enforcement brought her back to their facility and called her parents. She didn't want to see her parents at first because she had been so beaten down and told that she was worth nothing. She did reunite with her parents, and today Sarah is in college, and we can have an applause for that one. But Sarah was not your typical trafficking victim that we talk about. And I never want to miss talking about vulnerable adults, because many of these adults have been being trafficked since a very young age. But adults are also recruited as adults. Pimps are getting smarter about not going for younger victims. I've known several cases of where a pimp will recruit a 17-year-old and he will wait until she's 18 for her to turn her first trick. Recruiting places, bars, strip clubs, casinos, bus stations, parties, online. And something that our society, we're talking a lot about cultural and society changes, but our society doesn't anymore assume that a woman wants to be beaten, be a victim of domestic violence. Why do we defend a woman being a prostitute? It's not something that little girls achieve to be. These precious people are violated and violated and violated until they've got nothing else. There's a study that says 89% of those who call themselves prostitutes would ask to get out if they only knew how. And that's just the first layer. Okay, so I want to also bring up the link to porn and sex trafficking. This is a study that says interviews with 854 women in prostitution in 9 countries linked pornography to prostitution. And the almost half of them reported that pornography was made while they were in prostitution. 47% were upset by buyers' attempts to make them do what they had previously seen in pornography, and they also said that the pimps use porn to train them. And porn has become incredibly violent. And I talk more about that in my chapter 5, An Illusion of Pleasure, and how people are recruited into that. The culture of the internet is where this starts, and frankly, that's where the most sex is sold in the United States. Porn industry makes more money each year than NBA, NFL, and Major League Baseball combined. They've got the money to go out and get what they want. They recruit deliberately and intentionally. They recruit on Facebook, MySpace, chat rooms. Porn has become so violent that it's driving the appetite. There's a thing called snuff films where they actually kill somebody during a porn film. So let's talk about the traffickers. And you can see they all look different. And the pimp's ploys. How does a pimp come to somebody like Sarah and woo them to do the most horrific thing on earth? He sells her a dream. He says, "You're the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. Nobody makes me feel like you've made me feel. You are just one not in a million, in the whole earth. You're special." He becomes her boyfriend. "I'll take care of you. You need somebody to take care of you." And the one thing we want to teach our daughters is that you don't need somebody to take care of you. You are okay, and you are a strong individual. You can stand on your own 2 feet. There's supposed to be no rules in a pimp's household, but the rules are plentiful and painful. Promise of shelter, food, fancy clothes. How do they operate? They have control, psychological control. Street names. They use branding, tattoos, jewelry. They script the victims to, and a police officer arrests them, what to say. Physical control. There's horrific abuse. Exit fee means that they don't leave without paying the pimp, and yet the pimp takes 100% of the money. So they are effectively imprisoned. The pimps become the loved ones. And then for us to come in, they're not looking, for the most part, they're not looking for someone to rescue them. They are traumatically bonded with their captor. They don't believe they're a victim. So let's talk about the victim's mindset. Captivity, confinement, and isolation they've had. The victims have been locked in trunks and cars and isolated from friends and family. They have had the most horrific forms of violence used on them. They have fear, shame, hopelessness. They are absolutely dependent on that trafficker with that kind of a life. Their life goes from here to here in a nanosecond, and the trafficker illustrates that and orchestrates that so that they can maintain control over that victim to get the prime amount of money. They are traumatically bonded and instill the perpetrator is wanting to instill in the victim not only a fear of death, but a gratitude to the pimp for making them stay alive. The attachment is the rule rather than the exception. And there's a chapter in my book called Why Victims Stay, and they're using that in several universities because the trauma bond on people who have been traumatized is quick and deliberate, and it's desperately difficult to break. So who are these people that are buying sex? Where is the demand coming from? Well, there was a study about that too. The median age is 37. 41% were married. 42% had a bachelor's degree. 35% had at least attended some college. 81% were employed full-time. 26% reported serving in the military. 64% reported purchasing sex at least once in the last 12 months. And approximately 30% had watched porn either a couple of times a month, weekly, or every day. There's that porn connection again. So I want to tell you, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and tell you some things that have been done and are being done. For the last 5 years, I have gone to Super Bowl, never attending an actual game, but actually working in the anti-human trafficking efforts. And it started with a person by the name of Anna Rodriguez here in Florida. And this is from the Miami Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl I attended. And this is a magazine cover, and these magazines were in every free paper box in Miami. And you can see there's a voluptuous blonde there, and the title is Super Blow. She's snorting 2 lines of cocaine off of a football. And inside this magazine was how to order up a sex trafficking victim, how to tell if your prostitute was a cop. It was essentially a how-to guide on sex trafficking. So if we can show a video, I want to show you what we are doing now at Super Bowl 5 years later. This is from the New Orleans Super Bowl 2 years ago. As I was watching that, I know that we were not able to recover that young girl. And it breaks my heart every single time. And so I watch it, and then the next thing I go, oh, I've got a stomach ache. And that's what it does to me every single time. Because I know that unless, by the grace of God, she's been recovered, she's still out there. So we've got a lot of work to do. That's all right. I can actually run it down if you want. There we go. All right. So that is one way that we have found that we can help stop trafficking. And it's not like we went out and said, oh, we're going to do Super Bowl and we're going to raise everyone's awareness by Super Bowl. But I frankly stumbled into it. Somebody invited me to go. I every year did my best. At some point it was turned over to me to do the preparation for that. And as I began doing the preparation, I realized we've got to get the state attorney general involved. So every year we start with the state attorney general, we work with law enforcement, and we work with local nonprofits, and our job is to leave the place better than we found it. And so that is just one way that we can help stop trafficking. So how do we identify victims? I think I actually missed a slide there. Yeah, there we are. This is a page off of Backpage. How many are familiar with Backpage here? Okay, so almost everybody. So this is one of the things that we do during Super Bowl is we help law enforcement break down the things on Backpage. If you look over in that, the top picture here, you can see this poor young girl is bruised. This is a picture. I have not doctored that picture at all. I didn't blur her face. Her face was already blurred. And you can see bruises the size of a huge shoe on the side of her torso there. And then she's also being sold with another person. So we know that this is a pimp-controlled ad because they're managing two people. We've got the signs of violence. The youngest girl is, by the shape and size of her arms and her body, obviously very young. And so these are the kinds of ads we look for, and we work with law enforcement to do this work. And we do this. I do the same thing at home in Oregon, working with law enforcement, and I take their lead. And it's working with law enforcement in anti-trafficking efforts is absolutely imperative. We cannot do this work by ourselves. We need law enforcement. And so I work with them, I take their lead, and after trust is earned, then they begin to listen to me, and then we work together. And that's what it takes, is the working together. So how do we identify victims? And this is a really short list. There are red flags, I'm sure, in all kinds of booths out there. And if you're not aware of the red flags, I'm going to encourage you to pick something up. The inability or fear of making eye contact, that for me is the biggest key that I look for. Now, I am a grandma, so when I see somebody who I believe is a victim of trafficking, I play my grandma card, and I get right into their eyes and I communicate love. I can't say too much to them, but with my eyes and with my smile, I can communicate love to them, because I want them to know that they are seen, that they are person, that they are precious and valuable. They may have a fearful demeanor, small weapons, no ID, signs of physical abuse or malnutrition. And small weapons you wouldn't know, but when I work with police and when we do a sting and I'm sitting there with the victim afterwards, and especially if I know she's going to go back out there, I ask her, were you carrying something to protect yourself? And if she was, I commend her, because she needs that. But we have to also remember that communicating with the victim, even asking the right question at the wrong time or the wrong question at the right time, will endanger their life and your life. So we have to be very careful with that communication. I'm going to go off script here for just a minute, and I told Yvonne I was doing this because I have been in the trafficking movement, anti-trafficking movement, since 2006, and I'm seeing today something that we've got to address. It's the elephant in the room, and that is competition. If we are going to win this fight, we are going to have to start linking arms. We are going to have to start looking for the good in others, and remember that we're all on the same team. I took a hunch that I was not the only person feeling that. Thank you. I needed that this morning. Thank you. So in essentials, we must have unity. In non-essentials, let's have and exercise liberty. Let's give everyone an opportunity to make mistakes, because we've all made mistakes. And in all things, charity. In all things, charity. One of my personal heroes is Harriet Tubman. And I'll tell you all a little secret. Occasionally, when I carry a small weapon, and her name is Hattie. If you are tired, this is a quote from Harriet Tubman. If you are tired, keep going. If you are scared, keep going. If you are hungry, keep going. If you want to taste freedom, keep going. And for any of us who have been in the anti-trafficking movement for very long, we have been all of those things. And we have to keep going. When we're tired, when we can't keep going. I will say on the other side of the coin, though, don't neglect self-care. Take care of yourself, or you won't be here very long. And this is something that I have permission to share from this survivor, but it was on a page where some advocates were fighting out, and I'm going to read her words out of respect. I won't paraphrase them. I was rescued for a final time this January. I have been in the life since I was 7. Recently, 2 advocates have been having it out with each other, so I wanted to share my heart on it. For all the thousands upon thousands of people there are trying to leave the industry, why do advocates find the need to slam each other? We need every single advocate and more. I have the emotional capabilities of a small child, and I'm the one trying to negotiate? Come on now. If every advocate out there saved 10 people, that still wouldn't be enough to support us. We are, as survivors, need for you all to stop focusing on each other's faults and start focusing on helping more of us get out and be stable for us while we try to survive. How many people could you be helping in the time it has spent, both of you, creating pages and blogs to attack each other? Yeah. I love you both, but please stop. So we have got to continue to link arms, begin to link arms, begin to drop offenses. People have offended me. I have offended other people, but that's not what this fight is about. This fight is about letting go. It's about grace and moving forward and realizing that we are all on the same team. And so I decided that I was going to make a chain because we need to link. So I have little pieces of paper, and I'd like you all to stop at my booth right outside here and get one, and we're going to make this chain. And we're going to put our names on, and we're going to attach it, and we're going to be careful not to break it. It's delicate, but it's important. We cannot do the job without it. So to each of you, a courage award. Thank you for coming. I will be right out at the door out here. Thank you.